All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's October Nature and You lecture. My name is Jeff Ben. I am the Education Associate at Tuleyome. If you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit based in Woodland. Our mission is to protect public access to public lands and to educate the public about those lands. We focus on the inner Coast Range, which are the mountains located to the west of Davis and Woodland, with a particular emphasis on the Berryessa Snow National Monument, which is the relatively new national monument that stretches all the way from the southern end of Lake Berryessa up through the Cache Creek Wilderness and all the way up to the Snow Mountain Wilderness in the Mendocino National Forest. We do a variety of different things, including policy and advocacy work, field trips for K-12 classes, hikes and trail building days for the general public, and of course, this lecture series. We're also really involved in the effort to expand the Berryessa Snow National Monument by adding the Moloch-Loyak region, which is a ecologically and culturally significant ridgeline that runs along the border between Lake and Colusa counties. If you'd like to learn more about any of our programs or advocacy work or support us in that work, you can do so at our website, tuleyome.org. Okay, without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker for tonight. Andrew Fulks is one of the co-founders of Tuleyome and is currently on our advisory council. He is a licensed landscape architect and an assistant director of the UC Davis Arboretum. He's been working in and around the region for over 20 years on building and expanding trail networks and on improving public access to our public lands. Tonight, he's going to be talking to us about trails and hiking in the Berryessa Snow National Monument. All right, Andrew, take it away.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. As he said, I'm one of the co-founders. Got to put which hat I'm wearing tonight on. One of the co-founders of Tuleyome. 2002, I think it was when we incorporated. We had been working before then on the Cache Creek Wild and Scenic River campaign, and we've accomplished quite a bit in those years. And myself personally have been involved since the very beginning. Was president for more years than I have fingers on my hands, and so now stepped onto the advisory council, and I'm still working on trail projects and other things. I've been a little out of play for the last 2 years due to actually breaking my back out in the Cache Creek Wilderness. Don't ever reach for a rare plant on unstable ground and slip down an 8-foot ravine and land on your feet straight. That apparently doesn't do good things for you. But after a very successful surgical repair, I am back. So I am kayaking, backpacking, off-trail hiking, and trail building once again with no residual pain. So because of that, I've got some backlog of work, pun intended, to do up here in the wilderness areas. And I'm going to talk a little about some of the projects that we're working on, some of the trail work that we're doing, some of the future trails that are planned out there, and some of the current status of what we've got up there, and do a pretty broad overview. But I also want to point out some maybe a little bit more, depending on who you are, out of the way trails. There's some, as I was talking with Jeff before this, about, everybody probably knows Cold Canyon. So am I going to talk about Cold Canyon? Well, I'll mention where it is, but there's a lot of other ones that are really cool up there that people who go just a little bit further afield can hit without the crowds that you might find in some of the front country. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. If you could, Jeff, either allow screen sharing or me, or make me the host or something along those lines. It's got me locked out right now. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to go with my full computer share because I am, there we go, hiding that thumbnail. All right, so I'm going to start off with kind of a big overview map. And that gerrymandered line you see there is the Berryessa Snow National Monument, stretching, over 100 miles from Lake Berryessa up into the northern part of the Snow Mountain Wilderness and the Mendocino National Forest. And while there are tremendous amounts of opportunity in the surrounding areas for hiking trails and such, I'm really going to focus on what's in the monument at this point because, sorry there. Now that I'm host, I also have to admit people in the room. Really focusing on the monument, some of the enjoyment of the monument, and we can always have further discussions of the upper watershed areas and areas around Clear Lake and stuff. And one of the things that I really love about this region is the proximity to nearby nature. So, folks that live in the Valley Sacramento region oftentimes think that things are really far away to get to. And the reality is there's hundreds of thousands of acres of really close in natural areas that are like within an hour and a half, 2 hours of 3 or 4 million people, but almost, I'd say very lightly visited. You compare to anything off the Highway 50, Highway 80 corridor, and the crowds, right, on the weekends. You come up into these lands up here, and there's just so fewer people, and it's really, really special in that regard. And I don't know if it'll ever get sort of overloved, just because it is a bit more of a rugged landscape, right? It's pretty hot in the summertime. In the wintertime, the roads can get pretty rugged, particularly the off-road areas. In the spring, you've got your usual assortment of ticks and rattlesnakes, but the wildflower displays up here are phenomenal. The volume of trails that we have, and in things like whitewater rafting through the Cache Creek Wilderness. I've been on the Cache Creek Wilderness on a 4th of July weekend and been the only one on the river in the wilderness section. And if you think about what that's like anywhere in California on a 4th of July weekend, it's usually every river is just packed with people in inner tubes. But you go up into this region and it's just very wild and remote. So I can't really talk about the trails without talking about some of the fire history here, because we've had a tremendous amount of fire within the last 20 years, so within the 2000s. More so than I've ever seen, in my lifetime, and I think more than anyone in this region has seen, because of a history of both fire suppression as well as a warming climate, as well as droughts, and then the occasional lightning strike, as well as many human-caused fires. And so what I want to pull up here is 2 maps. So I'm going to start with kind of the public lands map, just to show you the extent of the public lands. So these are the lands that belong to all of us, where you can go and recreate, camp, any number of activities up there. This is probably one of the most inclusive areas you can think of in terms of diversity of activities. If you like hang gliding, there's great hang gliding places. If you like horseback riding, mountain biking, kayaking, backpacking, hiking, off-road vehicles, target shooting, you name it, it's allowed in different parts of this area. Not all of them in one location, but there are definitely distinct areas where there are overlap between the uses, and some areas where certain uses are exclusive of others, which is actually great, because if you particularly like one activity, you may not want to have another activity near you when doing that. But with this area, there's room for everyone within this zone to do those things. So you can see we're talking about a very large block of public lands here within the National Monument. The green is the National Forest, and then the BLM, and then we've got state wildlife areas. The Knoxville State Wildlife Area is part of this. Though it's inside the monument, it is not managed as part of the monument because it is a state feature and the monument is federal. So let's turn that layer off, and then let's hit fire history of the 2000s. So if you hit fire history of the 2000s, this is everything that has burned in the last 20 years. And most of that is actually within the last 15, including the Ranch Fire Complex, which is up here. That's most of this larger red. And the LNU Complex, which is basically all of this area. And that was the large lightning caused fire that ran through here. So as you see, most of the monument has burned. In fact, there's only one little part up here by Indian Valley Reservoir that is not burned in the last 20 years, one little pocket up here. So if you're looking for old growth Sergeant Cypress, this is the place to go. If you are in the Knoxville area, near the Knoxville OHV area, multi-use recreation area, BLM, that area also has a finger down the middle that hasn't burned as well. And that's basically it. Like, so most of the landscape you're going to go out there has had fire. Um, but what I've seen in this, in the fire recovery, is that within the first 3 years, most of the chaparral has come back, most of the scrub has come back. And, within 10, 15 years, you start seeing the trees, being maybe 8 or 10 feet tall. At least the pines and things, the oaks are going to take a lot longer to get bigger. And in some areas, the blue oaks in particular have been taken out and probably will not be coming back just because of the change in the understory grassland and the climate. But regardless, it's still a wonderful area to recreate in. But I give you this, caveat just because it's important to know that a lot of the photos you find online for some of these areas were taken before the fire, and then you show up and go, wow, this looks, really, really different. So bear that in mind. The geology is a lot more accessible now. So you see a lot more of the big rock formations and boulders that were hidden in the scrub beforehand. So let's pop over to the Google Earth map. Now, within this Google Earth map, you can see the outline of the National Monument here with the background of topography, and you can see the nice flat irrigated agriculture out here in the Central Valley. You can see the Sutter Buttes here and Berryessa over here. And what I've turned on is a layer of data from BLM and from the Forest Service showing their officially designated trails within this area. Now, there's a lot more places you can go that are roads. So if you're, say, mountain biking in the southern part of the Mendocino National Forest, there's a tremendous amount of dirt, Forest Service roads of varying difficulties that are just awesome to go out on. And then same thing in the northern part, there's OHV trails and things up there. What I'm focusing on mostly is the hiking trails in this area, but I will touch on some of the other recreational stuff that's available. So let me see if I can turn on some of the others because we've got a lot of, there you go. So if I turn on the Mendocino National Forest roads, now you can see the official roads within the Mendocino, and those are all by and large dirt roads. Some are gravel, but the vast majority are dirt. So I'm going to pop those off just for clarity's sake and zoom in and start talking about some of the zones down here. We're going to start working south-north within the monument. And I'd mentioned Cold Canyon, and unless I get a specific question, I'm not really going to cover that one just because it's the one that's probably the most heavily used gateway to the National Monument, the ease of access off Highway 128. Wonderful place to visit, highly recommend if you haven't been there, but just be aware, a lot of people go out there, so you will be, it's with a lot of people, it feels, a little bit more like an open space area you might find down in the Peninsula Bay Area or something like that in terms of the volume of people. But as you start moving up, particularly above Berryessa and here, you really start dropping out a lot of folks, and it's really not that much further. I think the total distance is like a little over 60 miles from Davis. If you're coming from there, that's where I'm based. So apologies if I sound Davis centric. Lots of ease of access to this from our friends on the Sonoma and Petaluma side as well, and the Napa side. This is kind of the in-between zone, right, between 101 and I-5. But if you go a little past that, there's lots of opportunity within the Lake Berryessa region. I'm going to try to use this 3D a little bit slow. I'll zoom in and then pause because I know there's always a lag time on the receiving end for folks, and we don't want to get motion sickness while we're enjoying ourselves. There is a thing, you'll probably find it on all trails. I don't have it mapped here, from the Smittle Creek Day Use area that can get you up to the Cedar Roughs Wilderness Zone up here through Napa Parks and Open Space Land. I don't have it mapped on here because it isn't sort of officially open at this point, though people do use the access through the Napa Parks property to get up here. But you can find that information online. It's one of those where I don't, until they officially open a trail, like to, have it on my set of maps just because I want to respect what the land managers are working on. But I can tell you they have grants that they're working on improving the Smittle Creek Day Use parking area to create a trail immediately across from the parking area and a crosswalk across Berryessa Knoxville Road to then open up that existing fire road that goes all the way up. So there's not really much work they have to do other than making that little connector there. So that is one of the things they're working on. Moving up to the upper end, north end of the Cedar Roughs Wilderness is the Cedar Roughs Trail, which is an access trail off of Pope Creek Road, Pope Canyon Road, that takes you into the Cedar Roughs Wilderness. That's a trail that Tuleyome worked quite a bit on. And then at that point, it's actually off trail. There aren't any trails here in the Cedar Roughs Wilderness. And you can actually see this is a post-fire photo. The whole top of the Cedar Roughs Wilderness did not burn, so you still have a lot of the old growth Sargent cypress in there. And this is the world's largest genetically pure stand of Sargent cypress. It's really cool up there. But if you do want to get up there, you got to do some bushwhacking to get up to that zone. I have done it. I love off trail. That's probably one of the reasons why I broke my back earlier. But you know what? I'm still going to do it because surgeons know how to fix me. So I'm going to keep on keeping on. This segment in here is kind of cool. This doesn't exist yet. This is a trail that Tuleyome has received a grant to complete. This is a new trail. We have finished the North End Trail at Lake Berryessa, and this is a continuation of the larger vision set forth in the Visitor Services Plan for the lake that Tuleyome participated very heavily in. One of our directors at the time, Carol Kunze, was kind of the spearhead for getting included in the plan a 160-mile plus or minus trail that goes around the entire perimeter of the lake. And so we're working on that. That's a multi-generational project. Same thing with like when the PCT was first thought of. It didn't happen overnight. You have to work on these things over generations, but you got to start somewhere, right? So we've built the 7 miles of the North End Trail, which I'll show you here, and then this is the Pope Creek Trail, which follows segments of old ranch road. That's the stuff that's in red, and linking those together with new segments of trail, showing these intermediate segments, and then a little loop trail and a connector to the existing Puda Canyon campground will allow people to actually come up here and camp overnight, and from the campground walk to the North End Trail and walk to the Pope Creek Trail from the camp. So we're trying to, again, increase the amenities up here nearby for folks to enjoy. This one's pretty cool because it gives you just great views back into Cedar Roughs, reasonably level because you're following the shoreline, goes by some really cool rock formations, and then it drops you off real close to the Cedar Roughs North End trailhead. So you'd be able to just walk a very short distance on the road edge and then take your way into the wilderness from there. So we're trying to always make these little linkages between places. The North End Trail, you can see this here. North End Trail, South Trailhead. I love that. Reminds me kind of the way they name streets, in Utah, if you've ever been there and seen like, North 176 Southwest, stuff like that. It's always kind of fun when they get these mixing of the directions in here. So North End Trail, South Trailhead. So this is a trail that runs along 7 miles along the length of the segment between the end of the Puda Creek Bridge. This is the Puda Creek arm of the lake here, all the way up to just before the this is the northern trailhead, just before we get to the Etiqueria Creek day-use area. And again, the idea is to eventually continue this on and across, and then on the east side, on the old east side. There's a little segment of the old east side road you can barely see here when the creek, or when the lake is low, that still pops out, that used to go down to the town of Monticello. But the lake has come up. Thank goodness, we need the water. So this road is now underwater again. So I'd really recommend going out and checking this one out. See if we got some photos from this. You can see this trail just gives you these great views back onto the lake, and the sun is kind of to your back. And this is also the quieter side of the lake. Most of the speedboats and things are closer to the resorts that are more near the dam and the deeper water. So you get a little bit more sort of calm feeling on this end of the lake. All right, moving up, I'm going to talk about one of my personal favorites, the Berryessa Peak Trail. This is a trail that, believe it or not, God, it's like 12 years old now. I can't even believe this. I finished this one just before I turned 40, and I'm not 40 anymore. So this one is almost 15-mile out and back. It's pretty rugged. Because of the granting of an easement in this little segment right here over a small piece of private property, part of a larger running deer ranch that John and Judy Alman granted to through Tuleyome to the Napa Parks and Open Space District. And at the corner here between BLM public lands here on the ridge and the Knoxville State Wildlife Area, thus allowing for a corner crossing due to their easement here, across here, and at a corner here, allowed for the first time in history public access to the 9,600 acres of BLM public land that make up the Berryessa Peak unit along the ridge. So this had been completely inaccessible to the public because it was surrounded by private ranches. Because of John and Judy's generosity in donating this free of charge, we now have the Berryessa Peak Trail built, and you get views looking down into the Knoxville State Wildlife Area, Lake Berryessa, and you get views of the see, that's, I want to show you guys that old one because there you go. Here's the summit itself, looking down, and you basically see the whole of the lake from there. We are doing on November 4th a trail maintenance trip up there. I don't think we'll make it all the way to the summit just because when you're doing trail work and you're hiking it and it's that long, it takes a long time to get up there. I like to do these as overnight trail maintenance trips because this particular trail, like most of them, and you'll hear me say this, repeatedly, most of them got really hit hard by a combination of wildfire followed by heavy rainfall years. So what does that mean? That means we have a lot of landslides we have to fix along the trail. That means we have a lot of trees that come down because a tree will get killed in the fire and then gets saturated during the heavy rainfall years. And then the high winds that everyone knows came through here knocks them over. And so now you have a bunch of deadfall across the trail. So then you got to have a special trip where you go up there with chainsaws and folks to help, buck that up and push it off the trail. So most of the trails that I'm talking about have been hit, particularly by the LNU fire. And so we're just requiring us to continue to start picking away at it. And given that we're a volunteer organization, it really requires on volunteers to help manage these things. So we'll be picking away at it and fixing what we can, as fast as we can. But I would say, please bear with us. We have day jobs. So one thing I want to show folks, they've got some old photos up here. Let's see, here we go. So this was in the 90s. I really miss it. So when the Rumsey fire, which was, I think, 2003, 2004, I always forget which one, came through, it was one of those 2 years. It actually burned basically all the way up to the ridge line and burned the fire lookout tower, which was kind of unfortunate because it was a pretty cool fire lookout tower up there. And while the area was not open to the public at the time, I did have a person that I knew that had legal access up there due to owning basically the transmitter towers. Took me up there and I got to walk inside the fire tower and take some photos and stuff before it burned. So, but if you do go up there now, you'll still see the old foundation there. And I have slept overnight on the old foundation, looking out down into the Cape Valley, which is what you see in the background here. Sorry, I gotta move the controls out of the way so I can see my little back button. There we go. All right. So Berryessa Peak Trail, definitely be in good shape, know how to navigate, be prepared for some steepness and some distance. It's about 3,500 foot elevation gain over the 7.5 miles to get to the peak. So it's quite a haul. I've hiked up there in rain. I've hiked up there in snow. I got some great photos of me in the middle of the snow trying to build the trail. I don't recommend trying to build a trail in snow. Because first you have to get the snow off the ground and then you got to dig in the ground. It's just a whole other step, but it was pretty cool to be up there at that time. Hopefully folks know about the Zim waterfall and the Zim Creek Trail. This is just a real gem out here. It's about 100-foot tall waterfall, Intercoast Range waterfall that's 100 feet high, right? It's in Napa County. It's on that side of the ridge. Again, very lightly visited. Very easy hike. I think it's a, 7-mile round trip, only 400-foot elevation gain, but you have to cross the creek 9 times. Mostly it's about, knee high at the deepest, only when flows are coming down, pretty hard during the wintertime. But just wear shoes and or water shoes or something. I did hike up there once with a person who did it barefoot, and I couldn't believe how incredible that was to do a 7 mile barefoot hike. But it's not really rocky. It's pretty much walking through oak woodland grassland. So she was more in the mud than anything else. But that is one that I highly recommend. And you can see the notch here. What you end up having is this waterfall that goes from the valleys back in the Knoxville Wildlife Area or Knoxville OHV area into the Knoxville Wildlife Area, and then spills down over the drop down here. Easiest way to get to the waterfall, I've gone up and over from the top this way, but when you get to about here, you can kind of walk down this big meadow here down and come at it from the bottom. It's got some good rock climbing there too, because it's got these sandstone cliffs that have these hand footholds that have been sort of worn in by water coming over there. So these wonderful little hand and footholds that you can use to climb the thing. Again, surprised I haven't broken my back somewhere else, but yeah, it's just luck of the draw, I guess. The Long Canyon Trailhead is one of the first ones when this area of the Knoxville State Wildlife Area was created. And it's an old horse corral when this was a private ranch. So the horse corral is still visible here. And you go up Long Canyon proper all the way up to the watershed divide between Poudre Creek and Cache Creek. So you literally get up to this connector right here, and you look down toward Ray House Road and Highway 16 and Cache Creek from Poudre Creek. I always thought it'd be kind of a cool one to do if I could do this hike and take some of the fire roads to connect and then walk down and do a key swap with someone who left their car on the other side. That'd be a really kind of cool cross watershed hike. That's one that maybe I should bug Nate about. The only problem with those is you got to really press that there's going to be a person on the other end of that hike to get your car swap from. But this hike, really great views looking back into so this is looking down toward Lake Berryessa. You can barely make out a finger of the lake here. And you can see the lake that's right there at the end. And you're walking down the old ranch roads, along through the hills. Not a terribly strenuous hike, but a really nice one. I think it's about maybe 8 miles or so. Really good one for getting to know this kind of northern intercoast range region. And I should mention that you can backpack and overnight camp in these areas. The only restriction off of Knoxville Road is that you have to be a quarter mile off the road. And that's really a restriction because of deer hunting. When hunting season starts, they'd have people camping in their cars along the entire length of the road. And so that caused some issues. So they said, okay, you got to be within a quarter mile, or I should say outside of a quarter mile from the road. Go back to Google Earth here. Then as we march our way up north here, let's see if I got past that. All right. I want to talk a little about some of my favorite trails, Blue Ridge Trail and the trails that we got at Valley Vista. Now, Valley Vista is another one that Tuleyome is working on. We are building all the trails in this regional park. It's all volunteer base trail construction. So the county acquired this piece of property here that includes this really nice knoll and this canyon coming up here that abuts BLM land. And the red that you see here are fire trails that we turned into part of the trail network. The stuff that's in orange is what we have built to date. So we've got this nice ridge trail and then loop trail that connects in here. We had an Eagle Scout that built this back segment, but it needs additional work because we built it right as the LNU fire was winding down. So it had burned all this area back there, which made for really easy trail construction. But then you get the flush of vegetation that comes after it. So we've got to go in and manage that vegetation because a lot of the trail is fairly obscured right now, but we've done all the earthwork. So we really just have to go and do some grubbing of the vegetation to get this little half-mile loop. So you'll be able to do this figure 8 loop when that's grubbed. And then we are working with Yolo County, with Nate taking the lead on building a smaller little 1 mile family-friendly lower loop. And he's built up to, I believe, this bend and a little past the bend. So we haven't completed the loop yet, but will shortly. And then on our docket is this back end loop that goes up the canyon and connects back into the fire break here. So you'll be able to park just past the bridge in a pull out there that's on county property and be able to walk this really nice little loop too. So I'm kind of mixing both existing and proposed future trails, which I should mention in the blue. These are conceptual trails. These do not exist at present, to link into the Blue Ridge Trail from the Valley Vista Trail. This one is following on what had been most of the way an old fire break on a ridge. And then this one would be completely new and fresh. We haven't fully scouted that. So this is a very conceptual location. I expect that'll be a few years from now, but we have to work with the BLM on this one as they work on their management plan for the monument. And we're involved in that process. We will be giving them input on where we hope trails can be. Blue Ridge Trail, of course, is one of my favorites because it takes you up to Fisk Peak. Fisk Peak is beautiful summit that looks out toward the Central Valley and looks down into Fisk Canyon and back toward the rest of the National Monument. One of the first trails I hiked back in the early 90s when I moved here. So that one will always have a special place in my heart. And then, of course, Frog Pond, which is one that I hope lots of folks have hiked. It's above the Yolo County Cache Creek Regional Park. From there, you can see the barn, the stone barn, and looking down on Cache Creek. So this is a picture taken from the Cache Creek or from Frog Pond Trail. The trail does a lasso loop up here, but unfortunately, this backside is overgrown. So we're going to have to go in there and fix that. And it's overgrown for a couple of reasons. The primary one is that we couldn't get back there for a few years while they were rebuilding the bridge over Cache Creek. This whole area was shut off because they were doing heavy construction on this bridge, and that was the only way across. And so we couldn't get back there to do the ongoing trail maintenance. The other reason is that while the fire decided to burn pretty much everything around it, it didn't burn the backside of the trail. And so the vegetation grew in and overtook the trail while, meanwhile, surrounding vegetation was burned away. So I'm kind of like, if only I could direct the fire to burn like the areas that need brushing, then I wouldn't have to do so much work out in the field. And unfortunately, CAL FIRE built a fire break down the ridge top here and actually obliterated this back half of the trail. So Tuleyome went out afterwards and we reestablished the trail corridor, and but we have to go out and do, again, more grubbing work because we did that right after the fire break was created. And so then obviously grass and shrubs and things came back. And so it is kind of obscuring some of that. So hopefully as folks, hear this, they not only hear places they might want to go visit, but also, opportunities for volunteering and just some of the larger challenges that, small nonprofits are facing in the face of climate change and trying to continue with trail maintenance and public access, but ending up with taking a step back every now and again when you get these kinds of events. And hopefully we won't have anything burn here for a number of years just because it's all come through and there's less fuel in this area now. Like I said, it usually takes about 3 years or so to recover. Let's see, move it up here, just outside the monument. So you can see the green line kind of jogs back in, follows Cache Creek Ridge here. Just outside the monument is the Bear Creek unit of the Cache Creek Natural Area. A tremendous amount of trails in here, right? There's something on the order of 70 miles that the BLM had mapped. This is a great area. It's on the edge of the Cache Creek Wilderness. So the wilderness itself is in here. You see there's very few trails in this area because it is a wilderness area, very untrammeled, wonderful area to kayak down. And you can see this is where Cache Creek comes down here. And in the summer, this is a phenomenal kayak run. It's class 2 water with one small class 3 at the very end of it. It's mostly about the wilderness experience. So when you get back there, you've just got all manner of wildlife from elk to I've seen river otters, beavers, bald eagles like crazy back there, even in the summertime. They winter out here, so you see quite a few more bald eagles in the wintertime, but in the summertime, there's at least a half dozen that stay here. And so, you're paddling down the river with a bald eagle 10 feet away, hanging out on a branch. You're camped out on a sandbar, under the stars. It's a wonderfully remote area. And I highly recommend it as either a long 1 day or as a 2 day trip. Putting in from the Redbud Trail over here off of Highway 20. Now I'm going, pretty fast through a lot of these trails, and we'll have Q&A at the end. But the thing to note is that these are all on Tuleyome's website. So they've got trail maps, trail descriptions, GPX files you can download for your GPS to follow them, PDF files that show the alignment of the map so you can download to your phone or, hard copy print and take with you. So the idea behind this talk is not so much to give you the exact directions on how to get here, but to pique your interest on what you might be able to do in these various areas, and then to go to the resources of Tuleyome's website and get more information. Cache Creek Natural Area has a lot of really awesome eroded cliffs, a lot of which have these different serpentine colors. So you'll see sort of the bluish cliffs, reddish cliffs where there's the higher iron content in the soil, all along the edge of the creek and the wilderness stretch. The Redbud Trailhead is this is actually an aerial photo. This is Highway 20 coming across here, and this is the North Fork of Cache Creek coming down here, and Grizzly Canyon is coming down here with the confluence of North Fork Cache Creek here and the Redbud Trailheads here. So you'd walk along this if you're taking the hike, or you'd pop your boat in the water right here if you're going to do the float down the wilderness section. Generally, in the summer, the wilderness section is awesome to run, except during drought years when they don't have water deliveries for agriculture. This last year, we had full deliveries, so it was absolutely sublime for doing rafting. And there's quite a bit of carryover water in Indian Valley Reservoir. So if we have an average normal water year this coming year, the wilderness stretch is going to be wonderful runnable conditions next summer. So bear that in mind if any of you folks like to kayak. The Judge Davis Trail also goes into the wilderness. So you see this, the orange trail. I've got these kind of color coded by use. So that one's a non-motorized, non-mechanized trail that takes you down into the wilderness there. But you see, if you're like, say, a mountain biker, all of this stuff in purple over here is open for equestrian, mountain bike, hiking, non-motorized use, right? So mechanized, okay, motorized, no. You'll be on the edge of the wilderness in some areas, but not in it, but you can look down into it. And if you are in the wilderness, I'd highly recommend doing the hike across Cache Creek. In fact, if you were to hike it right now, the flow is low enough in Cache Creek that you can walk across without a problem. They're only letting 3 CFS come out of the dam at Clear Lake. So this is the time to go in and do a little backcountry camping in Wilson Valley back here and get kind of really deep into the heart of the wilderness. All right, we're going to move up a little bit north here and look at couple proposed segments and some existing stuff that's out there as well. For one, for exploring, let me take a look, see if I've popped these up, because there were some that I had turned on and some that I had turned off. There we go. Boop. All right. So these roads here, I call them roads because they're old fire roads and old mining roads, actually. These are on what is presently known as Walker Ridge, which we are working with the tribes on renaming Moyuk Loluk, which means Condor Ridge in Putwin. And this area is just absolutely gorgeous in terms of wildflower displays and chaparral and cypress. Just a wonderful landscape, very diverse, lots of serpentine, tremendous amount of natural springs up here. They've got everything from, just really cold, cool water that comes out of the spring near Cold Spring Mountain to Salino sulfur springs. So they're very sulfury smelling and they're literally salt water, but carbonated. So I found some back there where it's like, I always taste it with my tongue and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So like swish it in my mouth, don't swallow it, it's salt water, right? But I swish it in my mouth and it's like bubbling on my tongue and it's salty. So there's, ancient seabed water coming up mixed with fresh water in this zone. And definitely, use your USGS maps when you're coming off Walker Ridge Road and check out some of these old mining and ranching roads that are up here, and some fire breaks coming down the other side. There are, or the one sort of official trail is the Baldy Mountain Trail. It's up here. And that is one that goes off of the road up to the summit of Baldy Mountain and then down the other side, all the way down to Bartlett Springs Road over here. The more north you start going, the further you are from the Sacramento metro region and the Bay Area. And so the much, much smaller amount of people you will see. I've had some days out here where I've seen like nobody. I might see one Jeep on the road, and then I get onto a trail and there's nobody there. So again, very much encourage folks to go out and start exploring this zone. Just outside the monument is kind of the area near Stony Ford, where there's a lot. This whole area is a very big off-road vehicle area. So if you're into dirt biking, mountain biking, you'll be sharing it with some dirt bikes if you're mountain biking. But this area is all official OHV. And then it's near the wilderness area, which is non-motorized, non-mechanized. I'd advise folks to go up to Goat Mountain if you get a chance. It's got a great lookout up there. It's actually over here. Somebody put in Google Earth, this is the correct location. And it's actually, no, that's actually Goat Rock. There's a really cool rock formation that sticks out here that you can see from parts of the Central Valley when you're looking back, but actually Goat Mountain is the high point further over. And it's got a fire lookout up there as well. And you can get there most of the way by vehicle, but you got to walk up the rest of the road. But it gives you a great look down into the rest of the Mendocino National Forest and the National Monument. Again, you can see the green lines of the monument here that come up Twin Valleys Road. And these are great places to do kind of overlanding. So if you've got an all-wheel drive vehicle, even an SUV, most of these roads are passable with it. So, bear that in mind, always carry spares and, tire inflation and such, but most of the Mendocino is pretty comfortable for folks with all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, and high enough clearance. The areas that you see here that are listed as trails, these are things you're only going to want to do in a quad or do in on a motorbike within the national forest lands, right? Where they allow that. Don't take your sedan on that. But anywhere they've got, you scroll down to the roads where they show the roads, those all in the yellow can be handled by high clearance vehicles. And those roads are what get you to a lot of the wilderness trails. So as you move through the National Monument heading north, you end up with the Snow Mountain Wilderness. So within the National Monument, we've got the Snow Mountain Wilderness, we've got the Cache Creek Wilderness, we've got the Cedar Roughs Wilderness, we've got a State Wild and Scenic River, we've got wilderness study areas, we've got areas of critical environmental concern. So we've got some really cool special places within the monument itself, which is a special place. Kind of start thinking these stacked layers of protection and experience that you've got here. I highly recommend the Snow Mountain Wilderness. Again, most of the areas it's had fires go through, but at just shy of 8,000 feet, getting to the summit of the Snow Mountain Wilderness allows you to look down into the Central Valley, down at the Sutter Buttes, all the way to Sierras, to Lassen, looking down at Signal Peak is another good one that's just north of there. Let's see if they've got any shots from the summit itself. Yeah, so here this is walking toward Snow Mountain east along the ridgeline. You've got these just open scree areas. What's crazy about this is that you can go up to Snow Mountain in like May and it'll be 95 degrees at the valley and it'll be like 69 degrees at the summit of Snow Mountain. And it's just crazy the elevation change that you go through and the plant community change that you go through. You start off, at the bottom and it's chaparral, and by the time you get to the top, you've got pines and everything in between, so you go chaparral and then you start getting into black oaks, and the black oaks give way to pine trees. I've always enjoyed starting from the Summit Springs trailhead. So you've got to take M10, which is once you get out to Dixie Glade campground on M10, this all turns to gravel. So you're on gravel road all the way up to Summit Springs trailhead. But then from there, it's not as much elevation gain to the summit. Nate really likes the West Crockett trailhead down from the bottom. And this one is a little bit more climbing. But the backside didn't get hit as hard by the fires, so there's a lot more timber still back here. And then you go past Milk Ranch Glade, which is kind of in the center of it. Let's see if this is there you go, Milk Ranch right there. So you get a lot of corn lilies and stuff like that back there. Your same sort of things you would find like in the Sierra, right? You'll get in the Coast Range when you get high enough and start getting to points north. Then from there, as we get toward sort of the upper tip of the national forest up here, you're largely hitting old fire roads and things like that. But I would really encourage it kind of from an exploration standpoint, because the lack of people. So if you're doing remote car camping, it's a great place to go. You find a pull out on the side of the road, camp somewhere with great views, off trail hike down to the creek, because there are creeks down in all these canyons. Let me turn the road section off here. And one thing that we're working on, trying to get into, some of the planning process, is to link the National Monument with the Yollobole Wilderness and the Bigfoot Trail, which then goes all the way up to the Oregon border. And we've been able to, probably about 95% using existing roads and trails, to map out this connector. And that's what you see in red here, that we've been able to take existing roads and trails and link them together to be able to do a trail that'll take you basically 100 miles down the monument. We've identified the northern section at this point, just for discussion purposes, where it could go. We started having too many options up there. It was kind of like, wow, we have too many riches up here. We've got so many different tracks we could choose. So we picked it based on a variety of features, what the views would be, things like that. But we'll be working on that in the planning process. So again, we're thinking generationally about these trails. We have trails we can use now and explore and enjoy now. And then we're thinking about how we link these together to create these experiences in the inner Coast Range in the future. So with that, I think I will open it up to questions. Let me stop sharing just so I can see all the names and everything, and then I can pull things back up again if we want to talk about specific areas. So Jeff, you want to MC? With that, any final words from our Tuleyome host here? Thank you for organizing this, Jeff. And
Sure, yeah. Thanks for a great talk, Andrew. If folks want to get out and explore some of the trails Andrew was talking about, you can go to our website to see our guide to local trails and to our events page. We have one hike planned for the day after Thanksgiving. So if you want to come out and burn off some of those Thanksgiving calories with us, we'd be happy to see you there. We've also got 3 trail building days coming up in the next month and a half or so. We could certainly use some extra help out on those trails to make some of these cleanups, and also for building out Valley Vista as well. So, all right, well, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you again at a future event.
all right, thanks everybody for coming out.